On a silent winter's night, Dr. Walker opened the hospital doors to find a lone puppy waiting in the snow, refusing food, warmth, or shelter. What secret was this little dog guarding, and how would its discovery change everything? A cold wind howled through the hospital grounds one late December evening as Dr. Thomas Walker, weary from a 12-hour shift, pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders and prepared to head home. But a flicker of movement outside the sliding glass doors stopped him in his tracks. There, curled into a small, trembling bundle against the concrete, lay a tiny puppy, his fur matted with grime and his slender body shivering with the bite of winter's chill. Night after night, Thomas would ease up the front entrance, only to find the same sad scene, floppy-eared eyes, gazing longingly through the glass, as if searching for someone they had lost, refusing the warmth of a cardboard box filled with old newspapers, and even turning away from the handful of scraps he left on the cold pavement. Though Thomas had never considered himself an animal person, something in the dog's unwavering stare, equal parts sorrow and hope, tugged at his heart with a force he could not ignore. He began leaving an extra wool blanket by the steps, fresh water in a plastic bowl, and a small dish of kibble each evening, but still the puppy would not move more than a few feet away. He sat instead by the very spot where the light spilled from the hospital windows, as though he expected someone inside to return and call him by name. Thomas gave the puppy a gentle pat on the head one night, and whispered, "Max," the name coming unbidden to his lips, and to his surprise Max's ears flicked forward as though he had understood, his big brown eyes softening for the first time. Though Thomas's days were full of human pain and suffering, he had never before felt such compassion for a creature so small and fragile, and a new determined curiosity grew within him. Who was this dog, and why was he so determined to wait here, night after night alone in the snow-dusted darkness? With the help of Nurse Sarah, whose warm smile and kind heart Thomas trusted implicitly, they combed through recent patient records and discovered that an elderly man named Edward Langley had been admitted 3 weeks earlier with a heart condition. Despite the staff's best efforts, had quietly passed away late one night. No family had claimed his body, and no one had come forward for his belongings. Yet in Edward's assigned room, tucked away beneath a threadbare blanket, they found no sign of his loyal companion. It became heartbreakingly clear that Max had been Edward's dog, and every sinew of loyalty in the little puppy's body seemed bent on waiting for his beloved owner to come back, even though Edward would never again walk through those doors. That revelation hollowed Thomas's chest with a deep ache of empathy, and he resolved that Max would no longer have to endure these lonely vigils alone. After his next shift, Thomas gently scooped up Max, whose paws were raw from the cold cement, and carried him home, wrapping him in the soft blanket that now carried Thomas's faint scent. In the warmth of Thomas's small apartment, Max hesitated at first, remaining stiff and watchful by the front door, as though torn between hope and fear. But when Thomas crouched down and whispered, "You're safe now, Max," the puppy's body slowly relaxed, and he leaned into Thomas's outstretched hand, his tail thumping once in silent thanks. Over the following days, Thomas watched with relief as Max's coat began to lose its mats, and his eyes brightened. But at night, without fail, the dog would wander restlessly around the apartment and return to Thomas's side, only to stand quietly and gaze toward the door leading to the corridor beyond, an echo of those nights at the hospital entrance. Thomas could almost feel Edward's gentle presence in the way Max lifted his nose toward the hallway, as if sniffing for a familiar scent he could no longer detect. The doctor, who had spent years healing broken bones and mending fainting hearts, found himself moved by the steadfast bravery of this small creature, whose devotion in the face of loss was a lesson in love that transcended the boundaries of speech and species. As Thomas sat on the edge of his bed, careful not to startle the dog as he slept curled at his feet, he made a silent promise. He would unravel the rest of Max's story, give him a place to belong, and honor the loyalty of the man who had loved him so fiercely. And though the sound of passing cars and distant sirens still echoed through the night, it no longer felt as lonely, for both doctor and dog had found in one another a quiet companionship, built on trust, healing, and the shared hope that together they could face whatever tomorrow might bring. One tranquil spring evening, after weeks of quiet companionship and shared sorrows, Max, his ears pricked and his nose lifted, led Dr. Thomas Walker down the winding brick pathways of the town's small central park. Lanterns twinkled like distant fireflies among budding trees, and petals from the cherry blossoms drifted in the breeze, swirling around the old wooden bench, where, to Thomas's astonishment, lay an envelope dusted with pollen and bearing Edward Langley's initials. With gentle reverence, Thomas picked it up and felt a flutter in his chest as he broke the fragile seal. Inside was a letter to my dearest companion, in which Edward poured out all the love and gratitude he felt for the little dog, who had been his steadfast friend through loneliness and illness. Each line brimmed with affection. Edward thanked Max for the comfort of his silent companionship, lamented that life's frailty had kept them apart in those final moments, and pleaded with whomever found him to give Max a new home, filled with warmth and kindness. Thomas felt tears blur his vision as he read, and Max leaned against his leg, his eyes soft with understanding, sharing the silent sorrow of parting and the tender hope of a future beyond loss. Determined to honor Edward's wish, Thomas spent the next days seeking out anyone connected to Edward's past. Nurse Sarah remembered that an estranged sister had once visited late at night, and through patient detective work, Thomas discovered that Clara Langley lived quietly several miles away in a white clapboard house on Elm Road. He called her gently, explaining that Edward had tried to reconcile with her before he died, and that he had left instructions only a loving relative could fulfill. When Clara answered, and heard of Max's vigil outside the hospital, her voice broke with regret and longing, confessing that she had never known Edward loved her enough to forgive past hurts. With trembling resolve, she agreed to meet at the bench, where Thomas had found the letter, and there the three man, woman and dog shared a moment of bittersweet reunion under the spreading blossom. Together they discovered Edward's leather-bound journal in his modest flat, its pages filled with plans for a memorial fund, benefiting local animal shelters, and notes for a mobile veterinary clinic that would bring care to stray and abandoned animals. Clara's tears fell as she read her brother's dream, and Thomas felt his own grief transform into purpose. They made flyers, spoke to neighbors, rallied hospital staff, and reached out to local businesses for donations of blankets, supplies, and funds. Gardeners offered flowers to decorate the benches where homeless pets might rest. Bakers baked goods for fundraisers, and children painted signs with bright paw prints and hearts. Finally, on a clear Saturday morning, the town gathered in the park for a simple service under the cherry tree. Clara and Thomas spoke of Edward's kindness, of Max's unbreakable loyalty, and invited everyone to contribute to Edward's compassion, the memorial fund they had established. Max, now groomed and happy, trotted between volunteers, tail wagging in quiet celebration. In that moment, he became more than a dog waiting by hospital doors. He became a living symbol of love's power to heal grief, to draw strangers into friendship, and to spark a community's compassion. And as petals drifted around him like gentle confetti, Clara and Thomas silently vowed to give Max the warm home he deserved, and to carry forward Edward's dream for animals in need, so that no creature would ever need to wait alone in the dark again. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. And Max, ever faithful, looked up at Thomas as if urging him forward with new purpose. Trials, triumphs, and a lasting legacy begins with Thomas and Clara tasting the bitter sting of betrayal, just as hope seemed brightest, when a smooth-talking marketing agent named Mr. Greaves, drawn by whispers of the puppy, who waited for his master, arrived with glossy pitches for books, documentaries, and branded plush toys, insisting that only his firm could properly monetize Max's moving story, and when they refused, he unleashed threatening legal notices, claiming exclusive rights, and demanding exorbitant fees, or face ruinous lawsuits. Almost simultaneously, an anonymous group plastered posters around town, casting doubt on Thomas and Clara's claim to Max, by alleging that the little dog had another owner, demanding proof and threatening to take him away. Fear and uncertainty crept back into their hearts, but they would not bow to intimidation. Clara remembered Samantha, a warm-hearted former foster family volunteer, who had once housed abandoned litters of puppies, and had quietly supported Edward's work. In a flurry of late-night research, Samantha combed through dusty archives at the Animal Control Office, unearthed Edward's original adoption paperwork, complete with notarized stamps and the signatures of 2 hospital witnesses, and presented the irrefutable evidence to a sympathetic judge. In a small courtroom packed with supporters, Max, trembling but ever gentle, sat by Clara's side as the judge scanned the documents and ruled that Thomas and Clara were Edward's rightful heirs in spirit and law, dismissing Mr. Greaves's claims and exposing the anonymous group as opportunistic troublemakers with no standing. Freed at last from legal shackles, Thomas, Clara, and Samantha poured their energy into building Edward's dream, a mobile veterinary clinic designed to travel dusty back roads, reach isolated farmhouses, and visit inner-city alleys where strays and low-income families often went without care. They found a decommissioned rescue van, which volunteers scrubbed, sanded, and repainted in warm yellows and gentle greens, adorning its sides with joyous paw-print murals and Edward's own motto, service, compassion. Inside, they installed a sturdy examination table, handcrafted by a local carpenter, a row of medicine cabinets, stocked with donated vaccines and antiseptics, and a cozy corner where Max, now wearing a little blue bandana, could greet anxious pets and their owners. On its maiden voyage, the van creaked over gravel driveways to a remote ranch where a lanky greyhound lay in the dust, with a thorn in her paw. Under the soft glow of a lantern, Thomas deftly removed the splinter and soothed her quivering limb, while Clara comforted the owner, offering not just care, but dignity and understanding. Word spread quickly, and soon families in towns an hour apart flagged down the clinic's bright lights, seeking everything from vaccinations to simple checkups, marveling that such top-quality care came to them free or at a price they could afford. Then disaster struck, in the form of a toxic spill at an abandoned chemical factory on the outskirts of town. Late one summer evening, vats of crimson dye and volatile solvents leaked into drainage ditches near a vacant lot, where dozens of stray dogs and cats scavenged. When local shelters and rescue teams, overwhelmed with human emergencies, sent out distress signals, the mobile clinic roared to life. Clara radioed ahead to Thomas and Samantha as Max bounded to the scene, barking urgently to guide them through plumes of acrid smoke. Under flickering floodlights, the team worked through the night. Thomas administered oxygen to cats struggling for breath, Samantha cleaned and bandaged burns on trembling pups, and Clara coordinated a makeshift triage area built with donated tarps and pallets. As the chemical stench stung their eyes, Max moved among the injured with uncanny calm, nuzzling each animal so gently that frightened creatures nestled into his warmth, allowing the rescuers to treat them. By dawn, not a single life was lost, and the story of that long night of courage spread far and wide, bringing in new donations of medical equipment, blankets, and volunteer time from townsfolk who had once doubted the little clinic. Years later, Edwards Haven stands serenely on rolling green acreage, just beyond the old factory gates. Its barns have been transformed into cozy cottages, where retired clinic patients, from one-eyed cats to aged shepherd mixes, enjoy sunshine and fresh air. A fleet of 5 clinic vans, each painted in a different pastel shade, fan out every morning across county roads, bringing vaccinations, spay and neuter services, and wellness education to families who once feared they could never afford a vet. Inside a bright brick building, classrooms echo with the laughter of children learning kindness from Max himself, now grey around the muzzle but still proud, as he sits patiently for pats and watches wide-eyed, as kids practice bandaging stuffed animals and learn to read compassion in a wagging tail. Volunteers tend a memorial garden blooming with tulips and daisies, where a bronze plaque bears Edward's final words, "Love is the greatest legacy." In quiet twilight moments, Thomas and Clara sit on a bench by the pond that Max helped locate on that transformative night, watching the gentle ripples and feeling in their hearts that one small dog's unwavering loyalty and hope have indeed healed countless wounds, united a community, and proved that true love leaves a paw print that endures beyond all trials into a lasting legacy.